So it's election year, and we were expecting very little in terms of industry stuff in the budget for us, and we got very little. We could probably talk more about what wasn't in the budget than what was. It was quite disappointing to see very little focus on the move towards electric vehicles, for example. There are three key areas of interest that we want to talk about. The first is national insurance. For a basic rate taxpayer, national insurance has been reduced by 2p in the pound. What does that mean? Well, for an average salary taker earning around 27,000 thereabouts, it's worth about £500 a year. So that's good news. But if we look at it through the lens of vehicles, if someone was to take a salary sacrifice, for example, the cost goes up a little bit. So for a £600 sacrifice for a basic rate taxpayer, we'd be looking at an incremental cost of around £12 per month. But nonetheless, good news, given the cost of living crisis that we're subject to at the moment. The second topic is fuel duty. Now, fuel duty is subject to a 5% cut. And last week in the Chamber, the Chancellor announced that that 5p cut would remain. What does that mean? Well, it's worth about, that sort of value is worth about a penny a mile for an average vehicle. Having read some of the responses to the budget from the EV supporters, they claim that in supporting fuel duty on petrol and diesel, it doesn't support the relative attractiveness of electric vehicles. But to put that into perspective, the average cost of fueling on the roaming network for an electric vehicle, it's around 70 pence per kilowatt hour, and that equates to around 24 pence per mile. So supporting petrol and diesel by a penny a mile, giving an average cost per mile of around 14p is pretty immaterial in considering the cost of charging an EV on the roaming network. Of course, charging an EV at home is considerably cheaper and remains to be so. The third topic I'd like to talk about is fully expensing of leases. For businesses that incur capital expenditure, buy assets, for certain qualifying assets, they receive 100% tax relief in the first year of ownership. Historically, leased assets have been excluded from that legislation. Now, obviously, leasing companies buy assets to onward lease them, so theoretically, to receive more tax relief or receive tax relief sooner would be attractive. But that's only for businesses that have their tax affairs arranged a certain way. And I'm not going to go into that here. The interesting thing, however, is although the Chancellor did talk about that in the Chamber last Wednesday, in the supporting documentation, it actually said that it was due to consultation and would only be implemented when the fiscal conditions were appropriate. Now, we're in the election year, so he made a very pro-business statement in the Chamber, but it turns out that the supporting documentation doesn't point to any legislative changes anytime soon. So we could probably set that topic aside for the time being until something more concrete comes down track. Again, in summary, not a surprising budget given it's election year, and there were a couple of things in there, but very disappointing to see a lack of support for decarbonisation and electrification, but not surprising.